The newspaper ran several articles in the late 90s. I was aware of it, about this group headed up by Wesley Acton and Emily Holloway, Bill Moore, several other individuals who were attempting to try and clear the property which had grown up considerably.
It looked like a patch of brambles. If you walk out in the countryside, it was a lot of trees grown up.
Not only was it bad looking, but it had become a place that was just not safe.
It wasn't even disrepair of a cemetery. It was almost an invisible cemetery where we had people who had served our country valiantly that were buried, and people drove by every day and never knew.
And I've always thought it was just a disgrace to let those people lie out there after doing some hard work in life. And I just thought it was the right thing to do, since this lady that I was caregiver for, her name was Mary Fisher Mars. And we looked for about 10 years. And then she said, well, Wesley, it looks like nothing is going to be done, and I am moving my people out.
Now, you mentioned writing letters to these community leaders who never responded, and she made the decision to move her people out, but you did not give up.
I did not give up. I just kept on working.
Okay.
And I had a friend, Donald Owsley, who was a notable person in the community. I would talk to him from time to time, said, Donald, we need to do something about the cemetery. And after Miss Holloway came back, and he knew she was back, and I would mention it, he didn't say a word until 94, 96, somewhere along in there. And she said she would be glad to work with me. She said that's one of the reasons I moved back to Owensboro, is to try to do something about the Greenwood Cemetery. And she and I, we partnered in trying to get something done. And had it not been for her, nothing would have been done. And if it had not been for me, nothing would have been done. So the two of us made a good pair.
Greenwood Cemetery, the project and how it came to be, is really kind of the perfect example of local government meeting its people and making good things happen. I won't ever forget that first meeting when Mr. Acton and Miss Holloway came to the judge's office to talk about something that was of concern to them. So Judge Norris, always eager to hear people's concerns and talk to people, and also a retired educator like Mr. Acton. They had worked together for years in different projects throughout their school system careers.
We told them we were there. Miss Holloway and I told them that we were interested in getting something done about Greenwood Cemetery, and they agreed and they accepted our interest. When we organized our committee, the Messenger and Inquirer was there listening to us, and they advertised it in the newspaper, and I think they said it something like this: a group of citizens have organized to restore and clean up Greenwood Cemetery, and volunteers are needed. And that's basically the only thing we said to the public that it got to them, is what the newspaper said. And when I got up the next morning, it was I got about 3 or 4 calls before I could get out of the bed good. And one of the calls was Jay Wethington. He called to say he wanted to help.
And I just wanted to, show up and do my part. And then I was tickled to death to see that there were a lot of other people that showed up.
Russia University came out on the first round, and they helped us pick up a lot of the garbage and junk that was thrown on the street in front of it and in the cemetery.
So there was Wes and Miss Emily, and those are the 2 names that just, stuck in my mind indefinitely. But then also the Sons of the Confederacy.
Our camp had been discussing Greenwood Cemetery for about 3 months as maybe a project that we could get involved in to help clean that place up. And then so abused over the years that we felt like it was a detriment to the cemetery and the desecration. And of course, we being country boys, we all had the chainsaws and equipment and stuff like that to do, a lot of the work. The first thing we did, Wesley had a little money donated to him already, and we went out to Agricole and bought a 5-gallon bucket of Roundup and some brush killer, and they loaned us a portable sprayer that attached to the battery on your truck. And my wife and I went over, and she drove the truck, and I got in the back and sprayed. And at that time, it was so grown up, the brush almost prevented you from driving through the driveways. It was an overgrown mess. And we sprayed it, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, and finally got it killed back to where we could actually get in there and start, the cleanup of all the brush and the weeds and stuff like that. So that was our first experience.
We just showed up that day and spent that first whole day dragging, cutting the shrubs, digging things out, grub axing, all of that kind of stuff. We were just really, really grubby. We had shown up with fresh t-shirts, but prepared to do some kind of hard labor. And we were nasty, sweaty, wet people by the time that first day ended. But we had so much fun.
There we had 2 or 3, I think it was 3 Boy Scouts wanted to do a project in there and working toward their Eagle Scout Award. We had schools participated. Daviess County High School had some co-ed Y, had a group of students to come out and help us. And Owensboro Middle School's teacher offered to her kids in class bonuses if they would go out and help us. And Burns Middle School teacher did the same thing. Catholic High sent a group, and even during the daytime, one of the teachers, Mr. Holman, they loaded up and came out for an hour to help us, and those kids really enjoyed swinging on those old vines.
They were cutting down trees, they were cutting down vines, they were hauling away lumber and stuff like that. And we cut down, I bet, 20 or 30 trees, like full-size trees. And there were graves, tombstones that were turned over and everything. And obviously we were just one part of the project.
This wasn't a short-term cleanup project.
No,
this
sir.
wasn't a couple of Saturdays out at the cemetery. This was years of work.
This was about 4.5 to 5 years of work to get it to where it is now.
Did you ever just feel overwhelmed at the task?
Yes, I did, because the first summer we were there, I told another friend, Harry Fields, who's one of the teachers I said, look, when the spring came, I said, it's growing faster and we can cut it down. And I said, I'm going to pull out of it. He said, oh, no. I said, you can't do that. I said, you got to stick with it. But anyway, that's when the jailer at the detention center,
Harold
Taylor, we called him and told him that we needed some help. He said, well, I didn't even know you all were out there working. I said, well, we're working and we need some help. And he sent some of the inmates out to help us out. And they helped us for quite a while, and they worked. Most of them were very good workers, and we were just proud and appreciative of all the people. We had over 200 volunteers over that period of time, and we were just proud that they came.
You spent all this time, these years of work restoring the property, and you didn't even know what was going to become of the cemetery when you were done.
But one thing I did know, I didn't want to put in all that hard work and go sit down and let it grow back up. And that's what we were working for, is to find some way that someone can purchase the property and keep it in good condition.
And they had talked to the city about purchasing the cemetery, but the city commissioners, and I understand why, they opted not to do that. So they eventually came to the county and asked if the county might be interested in it. At the time, of course, Jim Lambert sat in on those discussions. At the time, we had the jail crew who could do the cleanup work. They were doing mowing and cleanup for a lot of the exempt organizations around the community. So we had an avenue, an opportunity for a group to be able to keep the cemetery, to keep it up and keep it in order. I had a great deal of reluctance based on my prior experience with the IRS and other privately held cemeteries. They were a challenge to maintain. But nevertheless, with Jim Lambert's urging, I went to the auction, and I was surprised at how low the bids were, considering there were 11 acres of property to be sold, 7 of which faced Old Parish Avenue, Highway 54, East Parish Avenue. And seeing the development that was taking place there, I realized that there was possibly a commercial value to having that property. So when the bids got up to roughly $25,000, I looked at Jim Lambert and was nervous because I didn't have the approval of the other 2 commissioners. And I said, Jim, what do you think we ought to do? He said, it's a good buy, but he said, I'm going to tell you, let your conscience be your guide. You know, sometimes in not only as county judge, but sometimes in life, you get those messages sent to you that you don't think a whole lot about. But it was very profound what he said. And when you let your conscience be your guide, I bid on the property, got it for $25,000, which I thought was a bargain considering the quality of the property. Of course, I learned more later regarding the condition of those 7 acres and some of that property. Nevertheless, we got the property and began the process of determining the extent of the graves. And that is, we had to call somebody in who would be able to do some borings and determine how many graves were actually there. And we realized early on that while we thought there were only 200 or 300 graves, there were close to 2,000 graves there. People were buried on top of one another and they didn't have the money for markers, so there was no uniform pattern as to where the graves were located. The realizations of what we were able to do increased over time. And I look back at that opportunity, and it became, I think, one of the signature opportunities that fiscal court took advantage of to preserve that cemetery. And I know that Judge Mattingly concurs with that, and he has the same sentiments, to make sure that cemetery is preserved for hundreds of years, to take care of those individuals who were put to rest there many, many years ago.
It felt like in some way we were helping to undo an insult. And so working on that felt as though you were contributing to honoring people who long deserve to be honored, and helping to repair a breach. The notion that the cleanup was a combined effort, it was inspiring. There was an inspiration there that there was a sense of, a person's a person no matter what. There was that kind of a recognition that these were sacred sites, and that what had happened there should be a sacred thing.
It was remarkable in that the drive to renovate and to refurbish that cemetery, it was not by a group who came in screaming and hollering and banging drums. You've met Wesley, Acton. He was very gentle, very kind, very humble, and their whole group was that way. They saw what needed to be done, and they did it in a very gentle and kind and humble way.
Well, I've had so many people to comment to me when they see me. Said every time I go by that cemetery, I think of you, because I put myself out there to be one of the workers and to be one of the leaders of the group. And had it not been a worthy cause, I don't believe we would have had too many people saying, I'll be out there to help you.
I really think that the efforts of the community and those, especially Wes and Ms. Emily, who moved that forward, made a positive impact beyond the cemetery, well beyond the cemetery.
You know, people think all too often we look to government to do everything. Government can meet us halfway, and local government really is that piece that touches our everyday lives. So what Wesley, Acton, and Emily Holloway did by coming to their local government seat and asking for help, you know, they just needed a partner and they needed access. For people that are out there watching, you know, this and thinking about people 20, almost 30 years ago doing something that because they thought it needed to be done. We see that in our everyday lives. So, you know, with Wesley, Acton, and Emily, to remember their legacy by doing something today or next week that we think needs to be done, and to go get it done.
This is where most of the Black history is lying, right out here in this cemetery. And I just wanted to restore this cemetery land and make the young people who have relatives lying out here, I think they ought to know about them, and I think they should be interested and willing to come out and offer some of their time to see to it that it is kept clean. And we have a memorial service every year out here, and we invite them to come, but not many young people come. Mostly the older people who have close relatives in the cemetery come. But we have had wonderful support ever since we have been working on this cemetery. And I'm just glad it's owned by the county, and they will see to it that it is maintained and carried forward.